Hi everyone, I'm just going to finish off this slide. I actually, luckily I stopped the slides when I did. I actually had a meeting at the time. I just kept on talking during you probably noticed that a lot on that last video, longer than I expected. So let's go over some of the optional slides, and I'll try and do it fairly quickly. We're talking about how we understand environments and practice of work. And normally we figure out what kind of goals and what kind of outputs these practices have. So we want to understand how people do things. We want a holistic view of things. We don't want to worry about the software in use to help us inform design. And when we have software in use, we want to see what factors change adoption of using that software, or how it's appropriate for future designs when you do need to make a change. And so these kinds of questions that we have are like, what's the use context? When is it used? Why is it used? How is it integrated into your daily life? Does it actually support analysis, or does it get in the way? Do you have to work around a broken system? Like CU Learn and Carleton Central, having to deal with that and how to log in and stuff like that. You can see people where they hit roadblocks. What characterizes the users and the groups and even the power structure of the organization. What type of data and tasks do people have? And what type of tools are currently used? How do they solve problems? And what are the barriers? So we're going to go through all these, but really we have field observations, we have interviews that we can talk to people, we have laboratory observations, but really that's a secondary approach. The real one is go into the real world and look at people and see what they're doing. You're trying to derive requirements. So this would be one of those examples. So my supervisor, Melanie Torrey, one of her more famous papers was she went to an architectural firm, and all she did for several months, I do believe, was watch how people in this big conference room filled with people, yes, when people used to be able to get next to each other, around this big conference table would chat, and they would be putting up slides on a PowerPoint on a board, and then they would have a big blueprint, a paper blueprint they roll out in the middle of the room, and everyone's talking around this paper. Knowing how they work tells you how you design. Because if you just put things up on a PowerPoint slide or on a projector at the front of the room, you will not get the same behavior. You'll get actually a worse behavior because it doesn't lead to collaboration. So the key step is to figure out how people do things. You can look at this if you want. I find it funny. Okay, how do you evaluate visual data analytics and analysis and reasoning? This is our data and abstraction. So we need to figure out what kind of goals, what are their outputs, how does it support the tasks that they're trying to do? What is the task that they're trying to do? How do they reason about things? So this is, as a whole, it's not just a simple technique, but it's how does someone that is looking at the stock market, how do they do their job? What are the key factors they're looking for? We want some quantifiable metrics oftentimes. And the kind of questions you would ask is like, does it help you explore data, discover new data? Can you come up with a hypothesis and test that hypothesis? These are the kinds of things that when you have a visualization tool and you're trying to figure out how effective it is for someone's job, these are the questions you ask. Can you make decisions based on this thing? And we have case studies normally, so we see people using this system in the real world, either after the fact, after you build a system, or before with the older system. It can be longitudinal. So as in, I go over a run of years looking at how this system is being used over time. How is Word being used, or how is an email system being used in a company over years? And how does a company's culture adapt and mold around the system? When we put in the new LMS system, we're going to have this. The new LMS system is going to be, everyone's going to freak out when the new learning management system comes in. They're going to freak out. Everyone's going to curse and swear at it. People are going to get used to it. They will curse and swear at specific things. There will be a culture about how we design the content of our courses, and how the students approach problems will be molded around what we can do with an LMS system. The LMS system doesn't mold to us. We mold to the LMS system. It's really kind of weird. And that's what you study. And what kind of insights you might have. How do you reason about this thing? And what kind of meetings you have. Multidimensional, in-depth, long-term case studies. They're one of the suggested ways of looking at this. So it's looking at, over the long term, how people do their job using a particular visualization, or any system really. And you can include automated logging, for example, interviews, surveys, guided observations. But you need access to people, and you need to figure out how people do and what their pain points are. And then you can also do lab studies. We can code the results, codify the results. You can do think out loud lab studies, see how people actually do a particular task, right? Talk me through how you would figure out how your mark is compared to other students in your class. Controlled experiments, if you want to isolate a particular factor like the color scheme, or if you want to isolate the particular factor about the use or the importance of the fonts or the titles or the size of particular windows, how you click on certain things. If you isolate a particular factor, a controlled experiment works just fine. So what could you do for yours? Well, I'm going to actually leave this open. This is actually a previous slide from a previous term. The in-class exercise is going to be looking at this. But if you were going to do this kind of single factor study, I'm trying to think of who would have the best one for this. If you wanted to see how effective it was having the Milky Way galaxy, or the color use or the choices for the design of the Milky Way galaxy on how you explore exoplanets, that would be one of those studies. Can you come up with certain inferences about exoplanets, but all you do is alter one of the factors, one of the views, one of the facets to the data, such as what does the Milky Way galaxy look like, and how do we visually represent the various stars where these exoplanets are located. We can also look at communicating through visualization. No one's doing this, so I'm not going to go into detail on this one. Oh, this is visual encoding of the idiom. So how effective is it delivered or acquired, the message delivered or acquired? This is just you playing around with the visualization idiom and seeing what works, what doesn't. So in fact, I should go back. Visual analysis, reasoning. This would be, okay, so how do you reason about your data versus how fast does it communicate? This is one of those, like, how fast do you learn it? What do you remember it? How accurate is your assumptions? The difference between a pie chart and a bar chart, and why pie charts stink. This is one of those cases. It's not, even if people say that they like them, you're measuring speed, you're measuring accuracy, you're measuring learning rate, how fast you learn the system, how you interact with it. And controlled experiments are the big ones, right? You can do field observations, but if you're seeing how well an idiom works for communication through the visualization, if you're trying to figure out how well something communicates through the visualization, this would be one of those cases. So how well do people learn about their health lifestyle habits based off of the visualization you gave? What kind of inferences do they have about how they need to change their lifestyle, and how fast do they figure this out? What province of Canada should they go to if they're trying to immigrate to Canada and they're a plumber? Another example. How effective is this thing? This is an old visualization. This is not new, but how effective is this visualization at communicating how people change in the House of Representatives in the U.S.? There's collaborative. This is the one I wanted to skip ahead on because no one's doing it. Collaborative evaluation, the collaborative data analysis is really damn hard. You need multiple people that know each other beforehand, using a tool they've never used before, and seeing how they derive new information from that tool and how they communicate through that new tool. Is it efficient? Is it effective? Is it satisfactory? Support group sense making? So if you've ever seen people around a whiteboard, you know what a collaborative tool looks like, essentially. A bunch of people around a whiteboard and talking about code, let's say, or talking about whatever project you're working on, is way more efficient than trying to do it via a Zoom meeting, or each person working on their own laptop. Working around something, that level of interactivity, that level of flexibility in how we socialize is actually very hard to measure, but it's also critically important. So do we get group insights? how do we communicate whether I'm in control or not? If we're drawing on a whiteboard, who's in control? The person with the marker. Now, if everyone's on their laptop, who's in control now? So what tools, what patterns, what features, how do we work around this? There's some great papers on this. If you're interested, I'm more than happy to give you some examples. And what kind of process do you have? What kind of user requirements do you have? I'm just going to skip ahead because really no one's doing this. A lot of it's observation though, but the users need to know each other, so it's hard. This is another Melanie Torrey project. It just happens that she has a bunch of these things that were good examples. This is the greatest research paper title of all time, Collaborative Coupling Over Tabletop Displays. It sounds so dirty. It was looking at a tabletop display, looking at I think it was a map of Calgary, and they had these magic lenses, so you can put like bus information on a magic lens and move things over. And they're trying to navigate around a city, or figure out what their path would be. But it's multiple people working together on this tabletop display, and they're trying to figure out how do people go about that task, and understand how they do a trade-off for these lenses, or how do they think about passing information? How do they share information amongst each other? And then, of course, this is our evaluating user performance. This is the default that everyone goes with, right? How fast are you? Time, accuracy, work quality, memorability, descriptive statistics. Hey, 20% faster. This is what everybody does as a first approach, right? It's controlled experiments of very few variables. You design, you do this sort of head-to-head comparison between a controlled condition and an experimental condition. They're very simple tasks normally. Find the largest value here. Find the lowest price item. Individual differences matter between the people, but then you try and get rid of that either between subjects or within subjects' designs. But there are ways of working around individual performance differences. You can also do field logs, looking at how people actually do this in the real world. So this is a line graph explorer. I don't even remember what all of this was, but this was a study I did when I was a participant in at UBC. This is Heidi Lamb's work, and she's looking at using pixels to encode information about, I don't even remember what this is actually looking at. But what it was like, can you find the field that was the largest value? Can you find this? It was all very utilitarian. They're trying to just remove the domain and see if people perceive things better one way or the other. And this is the one that you guys are going to be doing, the user experience, right? It informs design, it uncovers gaps in functionality and limitations, but you're not going to say it's 50% faster with the user experience study. It's user responses. It's them talking about how they think about the problem. You're not going to get, this is better than this. You're going to get, the subjects seem to like this, or I think we're on the right path. You're looking at maybe some efficiency, some correctness, some satisfaction, trust, what they disliked or liked, but you're not going to get statistically significant differences. You can do things of some objective things. You can ask for like body sensors, galvanic skin response. That's how conductive your skin is. It's what they do for a lie detector test, in case you wonder. So to see how upset you are with certain things. If you do VR and you're falling off a cliff, you'll get a response. Your body will give a response, a fear response, whether the person realizes they're in VR or not. They realize they're in VR. They will still give a fear response. You can track it. You can track eye tracking, where they're looking on the screen, right? That can be objective. And then you can do evaluation questions. You can ask, what's missing, you can figure out what's missing, what's useful, what would you rework. You're asking questions the users might be structured or unstructured. And we're trying to figure out what kind of things might hinder adoption. If you're using this thing and they go, I hated this particular feature, maybe they won't do it. Is it learnable? Do they find it useful? And so we have informal evaluations like what we're going to do. So essentially you do a demo for expert users and they give you feedback. That's one. So that's not what we're doing. That is the cheap way of doing it. You pass it off to your friends and say, hey, what do you think of this system? Usability test, what we're going to do. How do participants perform a task to trying to perfect your design? We take notes and take notes while they're doing it. Normally, in this case, the users are going to have to self-report for our study. That's suboptimal. It's better for you to be watching them, and every time they frown or they swear at the screen or something like that, you take a note. Swears per minute is a great measure for how bad your system is doing, right? You're not going to get that when people are reporting, when they go after the fact, they report what they thought of your system. So unfortunately, we do not get this really nice effect of watching somebody use your system for the first time and them failing miserably or clicking the wrong thing. But we do with what we can for this term. Normally, we want to prepare our tasks precisely. We want a very clean script that everyone gets the same thing, and we want a bunch of questionnaires afterwards. We can also do field observation, so put it in a real setting, see people in action. That would be like the EM dialogue, the Emily Carr dialogue thing, where they're looking at the people in an art gallery. We're looking at Emily Carr's work. You put it out in the real world, see people use it. And you can also do laboratory questionnaire as well, so like a Likert scale. That's a 1 to 5 scale, that sort of thing, or have some open-ended questions. We can also look at our algorithms. Again, looking at our algorithms is how fast are you? What's the quality of the output? So if it's a multidimensional scaling, how much data do I lose, or how useful is it data? How distorted is the data? If I'm looking at a machine learning algorithm, it might be how fast does it converge, or how good are the results? What are the, compared to sort of ground truth, what the actual thing is, how good is the classification system? Which patterns are best or are more interesting, which is more truthful of the visualizations, is some things less cluttered than others, that sort of thing. Is it faster, less memory, less money to make? Does it scale to terabytes of information? And what kind of extreme cases do you have? So normally you're looking at visualization quality assessment, so like readability metrics. You can just do an algorithmic performance, other complexity, look at corner cases, look at how much data is required, or the wall clock speed even, like benchmark data. So I don't know if this is actually going to work. Hopefully it is. Nope, I don't think it's working. Ah, darn it. Okay. I don't think I have the link up there. There's a great graph layout algorithm where they just run the same graph and they do a layout algorithm for how long it takes each of these things. So the D3 force reuse graph laying algorithm, say 69 milliseconds, 58% of the time, versus 118 milliseconds for the D3 force algorithm, right? You can just measure it with clock speed. So these are what we've looked at. We looked at project 2, we checked it for validity in project 2 and 3, 5 and 6 earlier on, and then now we're going to, for project 7 and 8, we're looking at usability studies, just seeing how people approach the problem. So project 8 is more of this thing here. It's anecdotal evidence of utility, if you can find it. What I want you to do, try for 15 minutes or so as a group, is if you, in a magic world, we have all the time in the world, what would you do to evaluate your system? Would you do a controlled experiment? Would you do a qualitative analysis? Would you produce some kind of visualization and then just let people use it for 4 weeks? Do you use experts or novices? I want you to compare what's your comparison, right? Is your visualization of COVID data different, substantially different, or better than what was currently done in the research when they were originally reporting these data? What's a point of comparison between your ability to look at immigration into Canada and the jobs available compared to just going on the Government of Canada websites and looking at the spreadsheets, or some other website that has that? What's your point of comparison? What metrics would you like to take? What's important? Is it speed? Probably not, but it could be. Is it the insights you get out of it? The key is take a step back, look at those different types of evaluations that we have. And I want you to think about who your users are and what ultimately, if you had a magic wand or a magic ability to do any kind of one user test to get the most bang for your buck, what would it look like? What would you measure? How would you measure it? Who would you measure? What are you trying to get at with your study? Keep in mind that your study or your project has particular things it's trying to achieve. Those are the things this evaluation should try and hit. So with your group, hopefully chat with the group that you're working with in the project with, talk about ultimately what would be the ideal evaluation for your system. And then we'll look at this in class. Okay, so put it on the shared drive, and then when we reconvene as a class, we'll look at each one of your projects, what you would do on ideal thing. It doesn't have to be overly elaborate or fancy pants, but I want you to have thought this through, because that will tell you how you think through the design, or we're past design now, but how ultimately you would actually think about evaluating things. How you evaluate tells you how to also design and how to build. So try that out, about 15 minutes worth of work, and we'll look at this in class. Okay, thanks everyone.